Welcome to Kingdom First Podcast, God's blueprint for your best life. The podcast that shows you how to win in every area of your life through a biblical worldview. I'm your host, Jonathan Loudermilk, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. I am a kingdom-minded entrepreneur who's on a mission to help others live their best life by putting God first in their life. I'm also a proud husband and father. Each week, we dive deep into the stories and lives of those who are living a kingdom-first life and how that's impacted every area of their life. We will also be breaking down how to apply kingdom principles for success in life. So whether you've been on your walk with Christ for years now, or you're still just trying to decide if he existed at all, this podcast is for you. Get ready to expand your thinking, challenge your perspectives, and build a life by design. Welcome to another episode of Kingdom First Podcast, God's blueprint for your best life. It's your host, Jonathan Loudermilk, and we are here with my next guest out of our 8-part series of really bringing home the testimony of God and the power I've seen that's happened in my life, and as well as these gentlemen that I've been inviting on for this 8-part series. This is your first time checking in the episode. Make sure you go check out the previous ones that we've done. Obviously, like, subscribe, do all the fun things that come along with that. And obviously, if you get value from this episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone that could really need this message today. With that being said, our guest that we have on today is Zach Siegel. I've had the pleasure of knowing Zach for several years now. It's so funny. You start getting into online business and you think it's such a big world, but it's actually a pretty small, tight-knit world when you start running in the same circles. So I've been able to get to know Zach over the last couple of years through some of the masterminds we're a part of. And I've just seen just absolute shift in this man over the last 8 to 9 months. And as we've got to talk, we've had some really cool conversations about God and how that's really had a huge impact on his life. I'm really kind of shifting to the next season of his life. And I just knew I had to have him on the show. So with that being said, Zach, thank you so much for coming on and being willing to share your time and your treasure. I know you're super busy right now this season with scaling your business and doing all the things, but I'm just really grateful you would carve some time out so we can kind of share your story and talk about God a little bit today.
Cool, Jonathan. Yeah, it is a small world out there, and we've known each other for a while now. And as you mentioned, and like we were talking about before, I'm always down for talking about the King of Kings.
Yes, sir. Cool, man. Well, dude, I think the best place to start, like, before we get into like your testimony, when, you reach that point in your life where you're like, man, I'm done doing it my way. I've tried it all these different ways my way. It's not getting the result that I want. I'm going to start doing it God's way. Kind of break down and share with us like the season you've come from, your background, your relationship with it, so we can kind of have the full context as we kind of come into like when you finally reach that point in your life where you're willing to, once again, bend the knee to the King of Kings.
Yeah, absolutely. My mother was Christian, and she brought me to church when I was younger. I went to like even church camp when I was younger, Camp Shannon.
That's
And
cool.
as I got older, my mom, she was like, not the best mother at certain ages because she was going through a lot. Looking back on it, I know that my mother and I have a great relationship now. But she was raising 4 kids on her own. When I was 8 years old, my father filed her divorce papers with her, and unfortunately, they had to end their marriage while she was raising 4 kids, and she was newly clean and sober herself at that age, learning how to live a new life as a woman of God that is also newly clean and sober. So she was going through a lot. And me as a child, I was, not positively affected by her during that age because of everything that she was going through. So as I got older into my teenage years, I saw that when I was younger, I saw that she would kind of speak the Lord's name and then have negative actions affiliated. And I, of course, just as a human would, I affiliated, I'm not going to believe in something that has kind of, justified negative things for my life so far.
So not the best example yet then.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the Lord has brought my mom and me together so much. And it's really just looking back on everything, and this will happen to, I believe, everyone, because God's got a plan with everyone. It's just God preparing us for what He has prepared for us.
Mm.
Because if I didn't have those years, I wouldn't be the man that I am today, and I wouldn't, be here today speaking with you about, where how I've come so far and all that great stuff that's happening in my life. Um, it's not about all of the good things happening to you now. We were never promised um, these things, but you know, we're given things to make us stronger, and that's what that season of my life
Well,
was.
what's funny you bring that up because I had a similar experience with my family of origin growing up, and it took me a long time. And once again, I don't know how long it took you to kind of like come full circle with it, but it was about like my mid to late 20s that I really started understanding that, like, hey, my parents are human too. Like
Yeah,
I think we tend to hold on to like this expectation of what we would wish they had taught us, or what we wish what example they would have set, versus just realizing that sometimes that those people are put in our lives for us to learn from, not just in terms of a positive example, but maybe it's learning what not to do from seeing some of the mistakes that maybe they had made. And then we
100%.
get to make the decision on, do we want to change that or pass that forward. And I know for me, it's personally inspired me with how I run my family. Was I didn't have this example growing up. A lot of this I had to go learn from other examples. Like, for example, Keith Craft is a big mentor of mine
Hmm.
in terms of like how I run my family now. But I had to have the extreme example of what I didn't want growing up so that I
Yeah.
could get that desire to want to lead in a different way. Would you say that's kind of like the experience that you had growing up too?
Yeah, not only did you nail everything that you just said, I also realized that my parents were human in my late 20s, so we have that in common. So, yeah, man, I completely agree. And then as I got older, I knew that I was some sort of higher power, just because I had so many good things kind of save me, right? And some would say I got lucky, some would say, I did that, but I think that it was, and I thought that it was divine. So I grew up in Yonkers, and when I was a teenager, I fell out of touch with the Lord because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. And I just feel like the Lord never left me, but I might have left him for a little while. Um, and I grew up in Yonkers in a pretty bad neighborhood where there were lots of fights, gang violence. There was, drugs, alcohol, partying, and um, rebellious things, and just, not really an ideal suburb that you see on TV. But again, this is something that, in the long run made me into the person that I am today, which
Mm.
I love that person. I was also bullied quite a bit back then in the day. I didn't realize that I was being bullied, but it was by people within my own circle. Um, and I still keep in touch with people that were good to me. But anyway, I had a lot of weight on me at that time too. That was one of the reasons. Anyway, so I thought that because I was being bullied, that it was something where, like, I basically projected that onto people that I could bully. And I did
Mm.
that for a little while. And looking back on it, I was just such a jerk to some people, just because that was, my own insecurities speaking at the time, And then when I was 15 and a half, around there, 15, 16, I had failed out of, not failed out, but I had over like 150 cuts in high school. I had gotten expelled from a private school that I went to for I actually went onto the roof and I fell through a skylight 15 feet through two
What?
sheets of plexiglass, and two windows over, it would have been the gymnasium. It would have been 40 feet instead of 15. So this is just
Wow.
one of the first things that happened to me where I felt spiritually protected, seriously.
Right.
Um, Once I was failing out of school because of all the cuts, um, and I was also, drinking and doing other stuff. My mom had put me in rehab, and then she was also pretty, um, you know, physically abusive at the time, and she had, done something to me where she wouldn't take me to the hospital, and I needed to go to the hospital. Um, I have a scar from it. She broke up a fight between my brother and I, and um, she had twisted my finger after the fight was broken up. And again, she was going through a lot as well. Not that that's any excuse for that sort of behavior, but she's, more than apologized to me many, 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 many times, and given, um, her sincere um, amends, right? So my dad refought for custody of me at that time because she had won initially. And then he won custody of me after that, and I moved to Manhattan. And getting out of that setting in Yonkers was just everything that my life needed at that time. So I got very um, fortunate to be blessed with a newer school that I started going to called Food and Finance High School, where it was a culinary
Mm.
school with an economics focus. And I had teachers there that really saw potential in me, and they made sure that I got out of the bottom part of New York and got into a college. So I got into college at SUNY Oswego, probably for the sole reason that I moved to Manhattan from Yonkers, and I got out of Yonkers. If I had stayed in Yonkers, I don't know what would have happened to me. I was doing nothing but going downhill there, and getting out of Yonkers into Manhattan through a series of unfortunate, but what ended up being fortunate, and again, I think divine events, got me into college where I was able to expand my social base, and really get to figure out, who is Zach. And I did um, I did things a little bit slowly at first in college, but eventually I started to understand, like, okay, this is how we do school. And I ended up graduating with like a 3.8 GPA in my last semester when I was taking all capstone classes, right? I'm obviously skipping over some things for the sake of, getting to the meat of the testimony here, but um, you know, overall, I was in a much better place, but I still had a darkness inside of me from all of the things that I went through as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gotten, or what I thought was, I had gotten myself to this point where I got out of Yonkers. I graduated high school. I got the good grades in college. I put myself back into college when, I was having some issues. And it wasn't, all these I's, you know. That's why I still had this darkness, because I thought that I, was in control when I wasn't. I wasn't the one driving that ship the entire time. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the one building that kingdom, but I thought that, I was my own higher power at that point. And that's because and I keep saying it, um, just thought that, I had worked so hard to fight against uh, fight against the odds that were kind of dealt against me, when really, I just showed up, right? The path was paved by God. And I'm just so blessed to have um, to be favored and just blessed to be blessed, you know.
So,
So
so, so what? So when was the moment that like that where the rubber met the road to say where you're like, dude, I'm done doing it my way. Like I've got to do. We got to
yeah,
do it a different way.
yeah. So I continued to grow up and through my mid to late 20s, I just kept, having a roller coaster of a life. I ended up becoming a salesperson, and then that's a roller coaster in and of itself, right?
Uh huh.
Um, and then that darkness, it never really left me. So I started drinking more and more. The partying from college and, the happy hours turned into a lot more than just happy hours and partying. Um, and just as I got older and into my low 30s, it started to get real bad, right? And I got lucky with just being alive. I spent like 6 years in Mexico, or 6 months in Mexico at one point. And I was arrested while I was there for being too drunk and thrown in a Mexican jail. Um, for
You know you're partying hard when the Mexicans are like, you need to calm down, sir.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was bad, and I was hanging out with bad people, and just surrounding myself with not the best things, while also really good things were being put in my life at the same time. I was being put into masterminds, and opportunities kept coming up, and so I had this weird balance of, like, luck, um, blessings, and just fortune of not being hurt, um because I was dealing with like cartel members a lot, and I was hanging out with like bad guys, and even here in Charlotte, I was, out partying until all hours of the night, dealing with people that like were not the best people for me to be around if I wanted to be the best version of myself. And in the back of my head this entire time, I always had a voice telling me what I should do. And
Mm.
I thought that this voice is something that I couldn't live up to. This voice is something that I need to drown out. So I kept drowning it out. And I just kept getting luckier and luckier. And things just got to the point where I started to realize that there was a God watching out for me, or I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't keep getting these opportunities that I'm getting to turn my life around, because they just kept coming in a way where it was impossible to ignore, to the point where if it got to the point where I thought that if I continued to ignore them, that I wouldn't deserve any chances to turn my life around. I thought it got to the point where I really felt like I already didn't deserve any more chances to turn my life around. And um, I almost left my dog in Mexico, um, but fortunately I didn't. I also got evicted from my first apartment in Charlotte, um, because I was having money issues with all of the partying I was doing. And I'm being completely vulnerable and real here, because this is my story, right? And then I almost lost my dog again, because in the new place where I could afford to live, there were not any dogs allowed. And that's when I started to want to get sober. And I started to surround myself with people that were also sober, because I wanted to see if there was a different life there for me, because I knew that if I continued on the life that I was living, that I would not make it past 40, 45 years old tops if I was lucky. Um,
So would you
so
say like the being forced to have to find that new place to live where you could have your dog was that the moment that was like the shift
yeah,
for you?
yeah. So when I did get my dog back, um, I broke down and just cried for hours, and I begged God for a new life. I thanked God. I always for my early 30s, I always thanked God. I never asked for anything. I always spoke to God, and I because I knew God was there watching out for me, and I always just said thank you. I was always very grateful. Um, but I didn't, and I was only grateful because I really felt like I didn't deserve the grace that I was getting. And I never asked for anything, but that was the first time in my adult years that I truly, truly begged the Lord for a new life
Mm.
so that I can be the best man that I want to be. And that's when I started listening to the voice and that was in the back of my head telling me that I can.
Dude, it's
And then
so
I did.
funny how, yeah, dude. Well, so like, man, there's so much to unpack from that. One of the things that stands out to me is you're like, hey, like I had all these proving moments throughout my life of like God's presence and God's grace, but you had to have a certain amount of those exchanges and those experiences before you truly saw it for what it was. Now, looking
Yeah.
back in hindsight, it's easy now. It's like, oh yeah, that was him there, and that was him there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
when
Yeah. Yeah.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's easy now, but like when you're young and you don't
Exactly.
have the experience and you're going through it for the first time, it like a lot of times, like I don't know if you felt this way, but like I questioned it. I doubted it. Even I would literally go from a blessing where I'm like, hey, there's something special about this. But then I would convince myself that's like, oh, it was just a coincidence or, whatever. But until you've hit enough of those proving points to go,
Yeah.
oh my God, this has
Yeah.
been God the whole time. And now when you can lock in and see it, I don't
That's
know if this has helped
exactly.
you moving forward, but anytime I'm running into things now, because I've had enough of those experiences, it allows me to identify it a lot quicker, which obviously changes how I act within that moment, right? Because if you know you're going through something terrible and you know God,
Yeah.
like God's there and He's got it,
Yep.
it just allows you to have a lot more peace as you're going through
Yep.
it versus when I was younger going through those things. Like, dude, I didn't know how to handle it because I didn't truly understand that God had His hand on the situation. Has that been kind of your experience too?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how it's been. Now I look back in hindsight, I see all the places where God was involved, and I didn't think that there was anything until there was just an undeniable, like, hey, like it smacked me in the face, John. Like it was just like it was like a such a wow moment where it all came to me kind of at once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it truly felt like when I was praying that the spirit, and I know that that God was with me, but it felt like the spirit of God was inside of me, literally healing my body. This is also when I'm detoxing from other things as well. So it was also quite literal.
Right.
But I really, and I still feel that spirit when I pray to this day. If it is a very emotional prayer, I will, and even if it's just something light, sometimes if it's something that I feel like is exactly the way I should be thinking, I feel it. Like, you know, do you know what I'm saying, or is this just me?
Yeah, well, dude, that's the Holy Spirit talking to you, man. You know, it's just a
Yeah,
lot of times we don't know what that is at first until you know what it is. And
exactly.
once again, a lot of people find different ways to get there. Like I'll never forget this one guy. I was at a mastermind. He was like, "Hey, man, you want to come back to my hotel room and do some ayahuasca?" He was like, "This is how I talk with God." And I was like, "I think I'm gonna pass. I don't think hanging out in your hotel room doing ayahuasca is the best decision for me, but I wish you the best in your journey that you're about to partake in." And once
Right.
again, no judgment to him, but that's not the real path of how you build a relationship with God. That's someone that wants to take the shortcut and have the experience, which the experience is great. Like, don't get me wrong, like, it feels good when you have that joy come through and you have these epiphany moments. But that's not the real definition of a relationship. That's like being with your spouse and, you know, expecting it to be like a romantic movie the whole time. Like, there's going to be
Yeah.
seasons where you don't have the bubbly, warm, tingly butterflies in your stomach. Like, you're just there, right? And I think that's where the real discipline of learning how to build a relationship with God is really important, because it's in between those highs, right? That, you know, you and I with like addiction issue backgrounds, we kind of are naturally wanting to chase that high, and that's why both you and I ended up in sales most likely, because it feels good
Hmm.
to close
Yeah.
that deal. It's how do you handle yourself in the middle of those valleys, and that's through the discipline of prayer. You know, at least that's been my experience with it, and something that I've had to really work hard to build that muscle to, you know, be able to have those conversations, those revelations, without having to rely on, you know, hitting a rock bottom and then going, "Oh, please, Lord, help me," and being lifted back up. So you're
Yeah.
not having the roller coaster life at the end of the day, because
Yeah.
that was
It's
me
awesome.
for the longest time too, dude. And that's
Yeah.
part of why I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, going, "I'm done doing it my way." It
Yeah.
felt like I was building my life on a Jenga set, and I would get it stacked up pretty good. I'd be like, "All right, we're higher than I've ever been."
Yep.
But what I didn't realize was I was missing like three pieces at the bottom. And
Yep.
all
The
it took was
foundation.
one blow from the side, the whole thing would fall over. And after
Yep.
repeating that for many years, I was like, "I'm done doing it this way. I want to look for truth. I want to figure out how to do it God's way, because God's way is a sustainable way."
And usually you'd be the one blowing on the Jenga set.
I
It'd
know,
be your
dude.
wind.
Dude, that's the worst when you look back and say it was my damn fault
It was
the whole
me.
time.
Wow, if I just gave somebody else the reins, you know,
Right.
someone that knows it better.
Well,
And
dude,
this is
it's hard.
why
It's
every morning I wake up and I say a prayer that I learned from a fellowship, and it goes, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those thy would help. I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Amen. Because I don't want to be in control anymore. When I was in control, it was wild. And now, with the discipline of prayer, fellowship at the church, fellowship with people like you, and just listening to the voice in my head, knowing that that's the Holy Spirit telling me what's right and what's wrong, um, and doing the next right thing, and literally doing what Jesus would do, or trying as hard as you can, because I can't be like Jesus.
no.
That's, you know, not
Yeah.
something I could do, but I do actively try as hard as I possibly can to, and I'm not perfect by any means, but trying my best has led to a just significantly better life.
Yeah. Well, dude, like, here's what I want to get into with you now is, you know, about 8 or 9 months ago, I saw a massive shift in you. And I remember it was one of both our mentor, Trevor Cowley, had a conversation with you. And Trevor shared some of that conversation with me when I went down there for the podcast. And, you know, and I
Mm,
remember when I was talking to him, and I'll let you tell the story, but what I just want to share this is I knew something had shifted in you. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could see that twinkle in your eye and just how you started showing up. that you made a decision that you were going to do things differently. So I'd love for you to share that moment, and then obviously all the cool things you've been able to do moving forward. And obviously we can tie in how God has played a big part in that in your life. I know it has.
That was 2 months after the situation where I broke down crying and praying with my dog.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I
There
didn't
was not
realize
a lot,
timeline
there was
wise
not a
this
long
were
spread between that
that's
time.
that's funny, dude. Okay, so you
Bro,
had the
I
breakdown, you had the submission, and then you had the talk
listen,
with Trevor.
exactly. My business got to a point where I was I had every single odd against me possible. I was out of money. I was living with three other people um, in a very low affordable housing like place in West Charlotte. I only had a laptop and a cell phone. I was in $50,000 in credit card debt, and I literally took that with God, thanks to God. I built that into a company that's doing six figures a month in revenue. We
Woo!
fund millions of dollars into the US economy every single month. And that has happened in 10 months, bro.
That's what's so cool about it,
Literally.
man.
I
And
know.
dude, so I once again I want to get more into the conversation you had with Trevor, dude. I think it's important for people because God doesn't always show up if like it's facing the clouds, like the lion, like Mufasa in the Lion King, and like speaks over you
Yeah.
what you do. God often sends people into our
Yeah.
lives at specific times to have those conversations. But man, that's so cool to hear about how fast that mood for you, because I had the
Yeah.
same experience in my life too, man. Like things that
Yeah.
are
I
happening
remember.
this year, I've tried to make happen on my own for 7 years, dude.
Yep.
And it's happening
Yeah.
within months now. It's like God's
Secret
such a better
sauce.
CEO than me, man. I'll be the janitor.
For
I don't
real.
care what my position title is, but like you just tell me what to do, big man, and I'll follow the direction that you give. So I just wanted to share that because, dude, I've had a very similar experience. But I want to hear okay, so you have the submission. Trevor shows up. Y'all have the conversation. What was that conversation like? And then what happened that created that shift? Because that's where I saw all these things really start to happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So Trevor talked to me and was just like, I spoke with him and just told him like something's different about this time around. I have all of these hopes and dreams and goals, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I can do them and I can actually accomplish them. And Trevor told me, well, Zach, you've been coming around for about 5, 6 years now. And you're at it. He gave it to me. He's like, you're still
Uh,
not in. You're still not in shape. You're still, doing a lot of talking, but not a lot of moving. And with your company. And I was doing a lot of talking in the past, and I would do a lot of moving, but my follow through was lacking because I was the driver. So what changed was that I wasn't driving anymore.
hmm.
I had God driving for me. I had God leading my life, and I still to this day give my life to God every single morning, or try to every single morning. But, if I don't do it physically out loud, mentally, my life is God's, and the Lord knows it. Um, and that's what the difference was. That's what and Trevor told me that he's the kind of guy like that. If he says something like that to you, it's because he cares about you. It's because he
Right.
wants to see you win. And everybody else is just gonna, not. Most people are gonna not give it to you exactly how it is, and that's how it was. I had been putting myself around self development, personal development, masterminds, and a lot of things that are out there and meant to improve a individual, but I wasn't improving because I still had this dark side of me that had me in the driver's seat. And I wasn't able to follow through and execute on the things that I was learning until that darkness was overpowered by the Lord. And because of that power, I have been able to do everything that I've wanted to do for 5 years, 6 years, putting myself in these circles of self-development, personal development, surrounding myself with people that are doing better off than me, surrounding myself with people that are where I'd like to be. I was able to execute on those things without me in the driver's seat within months of me letting go and letting God.
Let him cook, man. Cook. Dude, so like what helped me and very similar to your story is when I got revealed like what the plan is for me, like what I'm supposed to do, right? That gave me a lot of confidence because as I've read the Bible, once again, every single story I've ever read in the Bible, God finishes everything he starts. There's not one thing in there, man, where he does a third of it, half of it, 2/3. It's 100% completion. And oftentimes it's also a very abundant completion on the other side. So when God reveals that in your life and you know, like, hey, if I just run this direction, I can't fail because he's not going to let me because he's already made a decision that this is going to happen. And here's my assignment. And all I need to do is go give him the most amount to work with in fulfilling that assignment. So I shared that with you, Zach, because I hear a lot of that in your story is like once you took that pressure off of like, hey, it doesn't have to be me. I don't have to be God in my life. You know, I can trust that he's got it all handled at the end of the day, from when he saved your life back when you're in high school, falling through the skylight. And then God knows all the other times you went through things. Like, dude, how much peace does that give, man?
It just gives me like every time I work in a very intense, you know, business where I have business owners reaching out to me for things every single day, and we help them to secure funding to get their business started or to enhance their existing revenue generating business. And this is not a light thing. People are very sensitive when it comes to their money, and it's not an easy job by any means, but with the peace that I get every morning, knowing that God has a plan for me, it becomes just, if something bad happens, it's not like, oh, whatever. It's like, I know that this is what's meant to happen at the end of the day. I know that as long as I try my best and my best is backed by something higher and stronger than I am, that it's just the right thing, that it's meant to happen. And I find peace with that. And, to this day, since I've found the Lord, I have never let something just go by the wayside either. I make sure that, even the other day, I had a guy that was not very happy with me, and I continued to be there for him. I continued to pray, say, like, I'm going to wish you the best. And I really want to see your continued success, even after he had, gotten very rude with me for something that I truly couldn't control. Um, it got to the point where he like was like, okay, you know, it's fine. He stopped basically. Um, and I'm just out here, doing my best. I'm not perfect, bro. But I do know that I don't screw people over. And that's how I was able to get through 5 years of having this entity, having this company of, and then having that darkness at the same time before these last 10 months. and still having partners, still having a good reputation, you will never ever hear one person say one bad thing about me not paying them, me not trying my best, me not giving them every single resource that I have in my pocket to help them, because at the end of the day, I still did the right thing. I just didn't really have the power to do the right thing for myself, but I did it for others. And now that I'm doing the right thing for others and myself, whew, boy,
Right.
come
Well,
on.
it's the reason they talk about you got to fill up your cup first. I struggled with that too
I see
for a
that
long
now.
time, man. Yeah, it's like you don't have anything to pour from if you're not taking care of you, and eventually
Exactly.
the takers always take. You and I both know that. So eventually you got nothing left to give.
Exactly.
Well, Zach, this has been awesome, man. Dude, I'm so happy for you, and just everything you've been able to do these last 10 months, seeing the shift, seeing you going out there and doing your part to expand the kingdom. I appreciate you so much, man, for being willing to come on here and being transparent and share your story. I know that's never easy, but it's super important, man, because we never know who's going through that season that needs to hear this right now. So with that being said, like, what's the best way for people to connect with you, follow you, do all the things?
First of all, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you for doing what you're doing. And I can literally only be humbled and just so happy if I can affect one life and help one person find the Lord and help them to find this level of happiness and peace that I get the pleasure of experiencing every day because I found God. I'll be so happy with that. So I don't mind being vulnerable. I don't mind telling my story because I know that, I pray that it can help somebody else. So the best way to get in contact with me is ZachSiegel.me, ZachSiegel.me. And that goes to all of my social pages, calendar link, website, summary, pretty much everything that you need to get in touch with me and my team.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Kingdom First Podcast, God's Blueprint for Your Best Life. We hope you found it inspiring, entertaining, and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on iTunes and Spotify. Your feedback means the world to us and helps others discover our podcast. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Facebook to stay updated on upcoming episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and everything else. Thank you again for being a part of our podcast community. Until next time, stay all in.